And we continue the conversation now with SABC foreign editor Sophie Mokoena, who joins me now. So we're seeing entrepreneurs like Jack Ma step up to give much needed aid to developing nations, continent, most of which occupies here in Africa. What else can we expect, at least from our own multi-billionaires?
You know that there was an announcement made by Jack Ma and later Ali Dangote. We expect perhaps other leaders, business on the continent to do the same. And I am sure that very soon we'll hear how is Ali Dangote going to assist the continent. You know, he is an entrepreneur, a big business, lots of businesses on the continent, particularly in Nigeria. You'd recall that this is not something new. During the Ebola crisis, some business people or senior business on the continent took a decision to establish what was then called the Ebola Fund, and they were able to donate lots and lots of monies. That money was used to try and buy equipment to assist countries that were affected by Ebola. And I think this time around we expect more countries to announce that perhaps they have received such help from other businesses on the continent.
And any expectations of our own businesses to perhaps chip in and boost efforts?
Already today we had an announcement from Telkom, even though it's a SOE, but they did announce measures that they are going to take to assist in this crisis. But we expect others to do the same. And as I indicated, during the Ebola crisis, we had people like Patrice Motsepe. In fact, it was Patrice Motsepe and Ali Dangote who started the Ebola Fund. And that money did help the continent. Today we're talking about only DRC, and we expect the World Health Organization to make an announcement next month in terms of how Ebola has been cleared in the DRC. But now you have this crisis of COVID-19, and we are hoping that again many will come on board to assist member countries. You know, some countries can't afford. And when you look at the health system on the continent, is really in a very, very bad shape. If Europe can struggle with a top-class health system, what about the continent where you have many vulnerable people? You have countries that are very poor. We know that the World Health Organization has indicated previously that their hope is that the continent in particular will be ready, because there are fears that the continent will suffer a great deal if countries are not ready. And therefore it's all hands on deck. It can't just be governments or leaders on the continent, political leaders. I think business and ordinary people must also assist.
So let's talk about African governments, what they're doing. SABC has deployed its various stringers and correspondents to look at the situation. Let's start with efforts in Tanzania. We just saw Koleta Wanjohi speaking there about what's happening in Addis Ababa. What about Tanzania?
Tanzania, today the president made announcements in terms of measures that they are taking to ensure that the coronavirus doesn't spread in the country. We know that you have lots of people visiting Tanzania for holiday, particularly when you look at Zanzibar, and therefore he has introduced very, very strong measures, cutting down on flights, visiting that country, cutting down on movements within and those who want to go outside the country, but also raising tight measures to ensure that you deal with the issue of fake news, because it can lead to where the nation is panicking and you end up not being able to manage the crisis. And therefore these are the measures that President Magufuli took today and announced after the number went up from 6 to 12 of people who have been tested, and they have tested positive.
So let's look further in the eastern parts of the continent. Rwanda, as Griselda Mary mentioned earlier on, President Paul Kagame has an iron grip on trying to ensure that the virus does not spread. Just how stringent are the measures? And if we also come down to Zimbabwe and look at the situation in Zimbabwe, what the latest there is?
Well, President Kagame announced very tight measures yesterday. One, there's no movement. One can literally say the country is under lockdown. There's no movement at all. You can't move from one city to the other. Even in your private space, you are not allowed to move freely in the very same city where you are. Secondly, no selling of liquor, complete shutdown of bars, and then businesses such as restaurant or where you can get food, it's just takeaway. Civil servants and public and private people who are employed must stay at home. No one is going to work. Secondly, he has closed all the borders. No flights arriving in that country, no flights flying to other regions in that country. Therefore, it's a complete lockdown. When you look at what he has done, he has completely implemented measures that were taken by China. And for him, it's quite easy because when you look at the type of leadership we have on the continent and the type of systems of government on the continent, it's easy for some leaders to be able to implement military sort of measures and with precision without no one is questioning. But in South Africa it might be a different case. The president has to be involved in consultation because people are likely to use the constitution to kind of resist and therefore it takes time. But for Kagame it was like Jinping, no, and no one is going to question the decision.
Speaking of the president consultations, we mentioned Reverend Kenneth Meshwe having met with the president. The church situation is something that's very worrying across the continent. What are we seeing in terms of trend? How can it be mitigated?
Well, many countries have indicated that no church services for Easter holidays. They have introduced numbers in terms of people who can gather for worship, but you know that people at times are violating those rules. And in countries where leaders are able to implement or perhaps to use the rules or the laws of that country to enforce any measures that have been announced, they will do so without hesitation. But other countries, of course, it will be a question of democracy, the rights of individuals versus the bigger picture of trying to deal with this crisis. And we know that the issue of church gatherings is a serious one. You'd recall that in South Korea, for South Korea to have this problem, one person visited China. When she came back, a woman in particular visited a church, went to a church with 500 people and many people were infected, and that's how the virus was spread in South Korea. But they are working very hard to deal with that. But they were able to quickly quarantine and also announce a lockdown in the area where this happened. Now, you have a situation in South Africa where we know now that Free State is in a serious trouble. You have people who were there, more than 200 we are told, who interacted with these people. Tests were done vigorously yesterday, and on Friday the minister was there, and they even sent the mobile testing unit to ensure that we are able to cover many people, more than 1,000 people who perhaps are linked to this conference. And therefore we expect, that's my speculation, we expect when the numbers come out today, we may have a worrying picture. And therefore it is important for President to also zoom in into what is it that government is going to do to arrest the situation in Free State.
Thank you very much, SABC foreign editor Sophie Mokoena. Of course, lots of speculation about what the president is going to announce. Some speculation of perhaps a shutdown of the country. Whether or not this is true, as we said, President Cyril Ramaphosa meeting with business and political leaders earlier on today as government mulls over relief measures to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19